Will everyone please join me in Gassho and repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu.
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 Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be home. I thank you all so much for carrying on in my absence and sincerely apologize for how long I've been away. But I was away for the training of new ministers here for the BCA and from Europe as well. We had the training of 5 candidates who will most likely receive their final ordination from the head temple from the Buddhist Churches of America, and then 3 candidates from our partners in Europe. So 2 candidates from Great Britain and 1 from Germany. Show of hands, how many of you have been to either Great Britain or Germany before? Oh wow, quite a few people. Well, just so you know, we have Jodo Shinshu friends in those countries. So if you ever are able to go and visit Europe or Great Britain or Germany, specifically in Düsseldorf, Germany, there is a beautiful temple there called Echo House. Dharma School students, say that with me again. 1, 2, 3, Echo House. Echo House. That's the name of the temple in Germany. So today we are celebrating our Eitaikyo service. Dharma School students, say that with me. Eitaikyo. One more time. Eitaikyo. Very good. Okay. Now, what does Eitaikyo mean? Okay. The EI means eternity or forever. What does A mean?
Eternity
or forever. Very good. Tai means generations or era, or generations, right? So what does Tai mean?
Generations or era.
Very good. And the last one, Kyo. Kyo is sutra. Sutra. So what does Kyo mean?
Sutra.
Very good. So today, what did we just chant actually before I came up here? What was it called? Amida Kyo, right? Kyo. So that Kyo is the same Kyo that we use for Eitaikyo. So A means eternity, Tai means era, Kyo means sutra. What does that mean? What does that mean? Why those seem like an odd combination to put together. Eitaikyo means that we are chanting the same sutras that our great-grandparents chanted long ago. Eitaikyo means that we are chanting the same sutras that the Buddha recited so many years ago. Okay? So this connects us to many of our members from the past. We are chanting the same words as them. This is very, very important for us to remember because it implies or it means that the teachings are going to continue. Now, when Dharma School students, when you probably go off to college, most likely, maybe you will, I don't know, but most likely when you're in your college dorms or you're off like overseas somewhere, you're probably not going to chant Amida Kyo on a daily basis. Or will you? Who's going to make that pledge? No hands. Okay, I don't see any hands. But however, as the time continues, and as maybe some of you become parents, maybe some of you become Dharma school teachers, maybe some of you become members of, you have to become members of a temple where you're currently living, right? And you see the next generation chanting the same sutras that you did. And maybe when you are away or overseas or somewhere else, maybe you are lucky enough to hear something like Jusei Ge. Now, Dharma school students, I know for a fact that many of you can probably recite Jusei Ge from memory. Who thinks that they can do that? Yeah, okay, one person. Yeah, be confident. I'm certain all of you could. I'm certain everybody in this room is able to chant Jusei Ge without the book. At least that's what I hope, because we chant that one very often. But maybe as you grow up and as you continue to spread your wings and fly beyond the borders of Tacoma or of Washington, maybe you are lucky enough to hear Jusei-ge somewhere else, or another chant somewhere else. And then what will happen is a sense memory. Something will click in your brains, and you will say, I remember this. I know how to chant this. What a special connection that I have. Here's something for sure. When I was living in Japan for all those years, and we chanted Jusei-ge with Japanese ministers, and by the way, many of these ministers did not speak any English, and yet Jusei-ge is the chant and the connection that connected us. We didn't have to speak the same language. We were probably born at different times in our lives. We were born in separate countries and separate continents. And yet at the same time, the thing that brought us together was the chanting of Jusei-ge, the chanting of Shoshin-ge, and the chanting of Eitaikyo. So while Buddhism is still very much a minority religion in this country, if you are lucky enough to visit or go to another place that has a Buddhist temple, and you hear the chanting of Jusei-ge or Sanbutsu-ge, you realize that there is a special connection that connects all of us as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. There is something very special there, whether it's the teaching, whether it's the camaraderie of all fellow people chanting together. This is something that is universal and goes beyond time and space. When I think about how beautiful that is, it really makes me realize the truth of the teaching of interdependence and how we are all connected. Most of us can really get caught up in ourselves and thinking about ourselves, our own selfish desires, what we're going to eat after service is done, where we're going to go to lunch, or all those different mundane things that kind of distract our minds. But when we come together and we chant these sutras together, I think it's one of the most beautiful things that this religion can offer us, is a universal language of not only the sutras, but of Namo Amida Butsu. And when you think about this, Dharma school students, many of you have ancestors who grew up in the temple. Maybe some of you have not, but that does not mean that the previous generations are any less meaningful to you. These previous generations are also very important to you, whether you have a familial connection or not. Because this temple, this building, these teachings, these chants, these rituals have been passed down from generation to generation. Yes, they have experienced some changes here or there, some adjustments, and permanence is also a reality. But one thing that we can say is that will be constant throughout our lives, and hopefully beyond our lives, will be the recitation of Nembutsu, of Namo Amida Butsu, receiving limitless wisdom and compassion. And Dharma school students, many of you are at that age where you will probably graduate soon and you will leave home. And as you do, I want all of you to try your best to remember those two essential words that the doctrine of Jodo Shinshu imparts on all of us: receiving wisdom and compassion. This is the same message that our ancestors and the previous generations who came before us received. This is a message that I hope that you will impart upon the next generation as time moves on. The working of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion pervades through all space and time, from the beginningless past to the unforeseen future. We are still connected with our past ancestors and past people of the temple through Namo Amida Butsu. This is why Eitaikyo is so important. We ask ourselves, how did we get here? Why is this building here? Why are these teachings and chantings gifted to us? And hopefully with a service like Eitaikyo, the chanting of Jusei-ge, Amida-kyo, Shoshin-ge, all of the above, will become less of a chore and more of a meaningful ritual that we do. I understand. Sometimes we look at a chant and we think, oh, how long is this? And we kind of do that we do the thing where we kind of flip the pages to see how many more pages we have left to go. I see some expressions of bashfulness right now. But realizing that this is a teaching and a ritual that is shared beyond our generation, beyond our time and now, hopefully gives you a bit of perspective, hopefully gives you an idea of just how important it is. I am so happy to be back here in the midst of a warm and loving Sangha. I think this is why we chant together. This is why we come together and listen to the Dharma, the teachings of Amida Buddha. Not only is the teaching and the ritual precious, but the community who shares in this ritual is equally so. I think now more than ever is a time where we need to listen to the words of wisdom and compassion. Now more than ever, when so many things can divide us, like our politics, our perspectives, our views on life, can easily draw a wedge between all of us. The Buddha's wisdom and compassion goes beyond all our mundane viewpoints of life. And with this in mind, hopefully we can continue to walk the path of Nembutsu together in friendship and in harmony, and together with our ancestors. Please join me in Gassho. And Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Nam Mandats. I rejoice in what I have and extol. Good morning, everyone. It has been a very long process, actually, in terms of the training for the new ministers. One of the main reasons, of course, also being that this is the second time that our head temple of Nishihonganji in Kyoto, Japan, has allowed for the second process of ordination to happen outside of Japan. Traditionally speaking, ministers were required to go to Japan for schooling and receive both levels of ordination in Japan, and also to receive an audience with Gomonchu-sama, our head priest. So just to talk a little bit about the process of what goes into this, when we had this 10-day session in Berkeley, California at the Jodo Shinshu Center, the Buddhist Churches of America, as well as the International Office, do our utmost best to try to create very similar conditions to that of which the candidates would have had to go through when they were in Japan. First off, being that every day starts with you waking up at pretty much at 5:30 a.m. in the morning. You have to wake up. You have about maybe 15 minutes or so to get dressed, and you have to wear robes the whole time. I'm wearing more ceremonial robes, but you have to wear the white hakue and juban and the fuko and wagesa, the other sashe. You have to wear that every single day for the entire day, usually. So you wake up at 5:30, and then after waking up at 5:30, you have to do cleanup. So there's morning cleaning that's involved, and then right after that's done, you have to change into your ceremonial robes like this, and you have to do morning service. Now, because this is kyoshi level, the services become more and more complicated. So what we're doing today, right, is actually a fairly standard, or what you see is more of a fairly standard service. But as the time progressed, the candidates had to engage with more difficult chants to do and even more difficult rituals that they had to do as well. So one of the rituals is actually, so you know how we read Eitaikyo together? Well, try imagine reading that while holding the book in a gold plate and that you have to hold steady, and you have to read it while walking, okay, in a circle around the Shumidan here of Amida Buddha. Then when you get to the front here, you have to turn to Amida Buddha, drop one flower petal and bow, and then keep on chanting at the same time. It's a very difficult ritual. It's called gyodo. So all the Kyoshi ministers had to do this. And there also usually is a ceremonial seat in front of the shrine here called a raiban. And in order to get Kyoshi level, you have to know the proper rituals, like how many bows you have to do in front of the raiban, when to put the incense holder down, when to take the striker to strike the bell next to it. There's a whole myriad of complicated rituals. And my role in all of this was assisting to ensure that the Kyoshi candidates did the rituals correctly, but more importantly, to provide translation for the two ministers who were actually flown in from Japan, from Nishiyama Betsuin, the training center, to translate this instruction. And so I will tell you that I still feel tired from doing all of that translation, translating from the instructions from Japanese into English. And then when the Kyoshi candidates had questions, they asked them in English. So I had to take that in, interpret that in a way that the Japanese instructor would understand, and then translate it back. So it was 10 straight days of doing all of that. And by the way, for the candidates and for the instructors as well, usually we don't get to bed until around 10:30 or 11. So it's a 10-day process of maybe feeling very much like what it feels like to be in a monastery, right? Jodo Shinchu, our sect of Buddhism, is not a monastic tradition, right? So we don't live in a monastery. I'm not in robes 100% of the time. But when it comes to ordination and the ordaining of ministers, I think it's very important for them, as well as, of course, the head temple does, but it's important for them to kind of, in a sense, rebirth themselves as priests, to realize the weight and the tradition that they are taking on. Because once you become a Kyoshi minister, the head temple gives you their blessing to teach the doctrine, okay? So when you receive the first level of ordination, Tokudo, you're only really allowed to assist the supervising minister. But once you receive Kyoshi, the head temple deems you fit enough to actually serve a temple of your own and to teach the doctrine. So this is a very big responsibility that these candidates had to undergo. But going back to the theme of Eitaikyo, it made me think about all of the previous ministers who have come before me. One of the things I think that is the best treasures that a temple can have is when you go into the Reverend Pratt room or the hallway at Seattle Betsuin and at White River, you can see a long line of pictures of ministers who have previously served before. Yes, my picture's up there too, but I think what's even more moving and meaningful to me is seeing the vast history of priests who have come before, and realizing, of course, that this journey of priesthood didn't just start here in the United States, but also in Japan, many years before, all the way to the time of Shinran. This is because the teaching of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion, universal acceptance to the Pure Land, accepting all people of all walks of life to become enlightened as Buddhas, rang true for many, many people from India to China, Japan, United States, all over the world, and now Europe. Because this teaching is so precious, Many ministers, long before me, and hopefully after me, have long dedicated their lives to sharing the importance of this teaching for all of us, for all of this benefit. As a minister, it's easy for me sometimes, I think, to get caught up in myself, standing here before you in ceremonial robes, elevating my ego to the sense of self-importance. Maybe it's a good thing that we have the upper banister or the upper balcony, so there's people over me still watching me, so I'm not the highest person in the room. But that being said, realizing as well that there were ministers who have gone before me, there are ministers still to this day, like Reverend Yukawa, who sits among us as well, and of course the other ministers who were present at the Kyoshi training who have had at least 30 to 40 years of experience being a minister in the BCA. Realizing that I am for sure not the top of the food chain or like, in my prime, or well, maybe I'm in my prime, I don't know, but I'm not the head person, that I am the most important person. It's very important for me to see the new ministers who are coming in and the ministers who are still working and way more experienced than I am. And of course, being amongst all of you, realizing that Sunday after Sunday, many people come here through the doors who are hungry to listen to the Dharma and listen to the teachings of Master Shinran and the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. This is why this tradition continues. It is very heartful to me to realize that the calling of a priest should not be an ego boost or so that we can get some kind of status. One of the talks that Bishop Harada gave us during this time is that asking ourselves why we are becoming priests. Why did I become a priest? Why are you becoming a priest? Is it so that you can wear fancy robes and stand on the podium here and just share your opinions? I hope not. Is it to make lots of money? Well, priests aren't known for making, or should not be making, like copious amounts of money, so he says, I hope not. But what, in fact, we do hope is that for priests who go through the process of becoming them in the Buddhist churches of America, do so because the teaching speaks to them, and it speaks to them so much that they have this inner drive to share it with all of you. The teaching of the Nembutsu. When we think about the teaching of the Nembutsu as well, it's a fairly easy teaching in terms of doing it. We put our hands together and say, Namo Amida Butsu. But the depth and the spirituality behind this action goes vast and deep and is often sometimes too complicated to say in plain words. And yet this is a ritual and a teaching that all of us share. It is one that has moved generations of people throughout the times in Japan, the turbulent times in Japan, and continuing on to this day. Looking at our history of Jodo Shinshu, there could have been so many times in our historical being that we could have just extinguished or that we could have just fallen out by the wayside. Nobunaga could have crushed us at Ishiyama Honganji, where Osaka Castle stands today. And yet, because of the fortitude of the Nembutsu followers and the importance of the teaching, they endured. Coming through the Meiji Restoration, when state Shinto was imparted on the people and saying that only Shinto is the legitimate religion, Buddhists, you have to make a case for yourself or else you're not going to exist anymore. Jodo Shinshu, both Nishi, Higashi, all the 10 schools of Shinran survived. Coming to America, receiving adversity, xenophobia, racism, even violence and bigotry, the teaching was still so precious that it still endured. And even coming to the turbulent times of today's world, where it's possible that troubles could lie ahead, we don't know. The teaching of Nembutsu can still continue. And this is if we do our part in really trying to live these teachings that are given to us, those of compassion, kindness, wisdom, and understanding, from the benevolence of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion. If we can continue to live by these principles, I do believe sincerely and wholeheartedly that Jodo Shinshu has a bright future ahead. I do not want to be the last priest who takes upon this journey of becoming a priest. And clearly I will not be, because we've completed the process of 8 new priests. And the good news is ahead, we still have more candidates who are interested in taking on the robes. But this is also a very, very stringent and strict process as well. We have to realize myself, that I am not given or gifted the role of the minister by the head temple, but that I have basically assured the head temple that I will continue giving and helping to share Shinran Shonin's words of wisdom. It is not something that I earned, and I put that in quotation marks, on my own. It is countless causes and conditions, the support of sanghas like you, and the support of the head temple that allows people like me to become priests. And it is something that I should never forget. If you ever hear a priest say something like, I earned this role, I did hard work, I deserve to be here, up here, that's a very bad sign. Instead, hopefully you hear a priest look deeply at all of you and say things like, arigato, thank you, okage-sama de, because of you, and onembutsu shite kudasai, say the nembutsu, please. All of these deep feelings were given to me once again and reignited during my time in California helping to train the priests of tomorrow. I sincerely appreciate the Tacoma Buddhist Temple's continued support of not just myself, but of the future of the Buddhist churches of America. As we celebrate today's Eitaikyo service, where we talk about the generations of members who have come long before us, let us look to the future as well and do our best to ensure the continuation of the Nembutsu teaching for future generations to enjoy. Will you all please join me in Gassho and recite the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Nam mandats, nam mandats, nam mandats, nam mandats, nam mandats, nam mandats.